Hello, and thank you for joining me for the slave narrative of Hagar Lewis. Hagar Lewis was tall and erect at 82 years of age. She lived at 4313 Rosa Street in El Paso, Texas, whenever she was interviewed. She was born a slave of the Martin family and was given with her mother and family to Mary Martin when she married John M. McFarland. So when Mary Martin got married to John M. McFarland, Hagar and her mother were given as a gift to Mary. They lived near Tyler, Smith County, Texas. When she was freed, she remained with the McFarlands until she married A. Lewis and moved to San Antonio, Texas. It was not unusual for slaves, after they were recently freed, to stay with the same slave master that they had previously. And the reason why is because they had nowhere else to go. So they would stay on the plantation and they would work for their food and for a place to stay. So they would stay in those old slave cabins and they would work and they would share the crops. And so that's where the term sharecropper came from. So Hagar was widowed early, but she had two sons that she raised. One of her sons became the chief electrical engineer within the U.S. government. He lived in New York City and he provided for his mother while she aged. So when the interviewer interviewed Hagar, this is what she said. She said, I was born January 12th, 1855. My first owners was the Martins, and when their daughter Mary married, I was give to her. My mama lived to 112 years old. She had 16 children. I was the baby. Mrs. Mary McFarland, my mother's Mrs., and nine taught us children with her own, learned us how to read and write. She treated us just like we were her children. I noticed a lot of slaves would say this, and they would say that because they would feed the children together and they would think, and so she's teaching the children together, and so she's thinking that maybe she's being treated like Mary's children, but there was definitely a difference between the way that Hagar was treated and the way that Mary treated her own children. But Hagar said, we had very strict leaders, my mother and Mrs. Mary. Mrs. Mary would say, her mother's name, she would say, Mammy Liz, which is Hagar's mother, you'll have to come and whoop Oscar and Hagar. They's fighting. And Mammy would say, no, I won't whip them. I'll just punish them. And we'd have to stand with our backs to each other. She said she was 12 years old when she was freed. She said, I can remember the way my master came home from the war. The oldest son, Oscar, and I was out in the yard, and I saw master first coming down the road, and I hollered and screamed, oh, Oscar, Master John's a coming. Master John's a coming home. We stayed on with them till they all died off, except for Oscar. We never changed our name till after the Civil War. Then Master John said, Mammy Liz, you got to choose a name. He carried us into Tyler to a bureau or something. And Mammy Liz, which is Hagar's mother, said, I'm going to keep the name McFarland. I ain't got no other name. My father was a slave from another farm, Hagar said. My mother was the cook. She cooked it all in the same place for white folks and us. We ate the same when the white folks was finished. They's a big light bread oven in the yard of the big house and in front of the quarters under a big tree. That one baked the pies. The cabins had a big fireplace wider than that there piano. They'd hang meat and dry them in the fireplace and sausage, cut holes in ham and hang them there. Had big hog heads filled with flour, corn, and wheat. So when Hagar says that her mother cooked the food in the same place for white folks and for us. She said we ate the same when the white folks was finished. So when the white folks were finished, they gave them their food. So they ate the same as the white folks. Some poor slaves were half starved. They belonged to other people. Mrs. Mary would call them in to feed them. See 'em outside the fence picking up scraps. They called out at night, Master John, Master John. They's afraid to come in daytime. Master John say, what's the matter now? They'd say, I was hungry. He say, come in and get it. He'd cure lots of meat, for we'd hear him hollering at night when they beat the poor slaves for begging or stealing or some crime. Master John would saddle up old Charlie, his horse, and go and see. Master John rode with a big shotgun across his lap. We'd hear that old bullwhip just a popping. They turned him loose when Master John got after him. He prosecuted some masters for beating the slaves. He knew they was half feeding them. One time he let us go see where they drug two slaves to death with oxen for stealing or something. I can't say we were treated bad because I'd tell a story. I've always been treated good by whites, but many of the slaves were killed. They'd say bad words to the bosses and they'd shoot 'em. We'd ask Miss Mary, why did they kill old Uncle so and so? And Miss Mary would say, I don't know. It's not right to say when you don't know. I'm so glad slavery is over. When I was turned loose, Miss Mary was training me and Mister to do handwork, knitting and such. Mama wouldn't let us dance, didn't want any rough children. Miss Mary'd say, when I'd get sleepy, Owl eyes, ain't you sleepy? I'd say, no, ma'am. Anything you want us to do? I cried to sleep in the big house with Miss Mary and the children, 'cause my sister Belle did. Said she's going to turn white 'cause she stayed with the white folks, and I wanted to turn white too. Miss Mary make our Sunday dresses. My mother put color thread in woven material, and they was pretty. We had plenty of clothes. Miss Mary saw to that. They paid my mother for every child she had that was big enough to work, and Master John saw that others did the same. And so basically what that means is they would hire the children out to other people, and the other people would pay for those children to work. Some whites had a dark hole in the ground, a dungeon. They walled it to put their slaves in. They carry 'em bread and water once a day. I was afraid of the hole. They tell me the devil was in there. We set traps for possums, coons, and squirrels. We used to have big sport riding goats, and one near busted me wide open. Miss Mary's brother put me on it, and they punished him good for it. He didn't get to play for a long time. And we had an old buck sheep. He'd keep Oscar and I up on the oak patch fence all the time. We'd watch the Doodle Bugs build their houses. We'd sing, Doodle Doodle, your house burned down. Those things would come up out of their holes just shaking. One game I remember was Skip Frog, answer your mother, she's calling you, you, you. We'd stand in a circle, and one would be Skip Frog, and we'd slap our hands, and Skip Frog would be hopping just like frogs do. Oh, I wish I could go back to them times back again to see my family. I'd go back tomorrow, but I'm trying to live so I can meet them once again. Thank you for listening to the slave narrative of Hagar Lewis. Aunt Hagar, may you rest in peace. Subscribe to hear more slave narratives.